What is up, guys? Aksis here, and today we're taking a look at a weapon that everyone seems to have forgotten about, the No Time to Explain exotic pulse rifle, and taking it in to the Wrath of the Machine raid. Now, the No Time to Explain, introduced in the Taken King expansion, is a very interesting weapon, and the reason we're looking at it today is that this weapon's exotic perk actually perfectly lends itself to raid gameplay. The exotic perk of the No Time to Explain is Rewind Again. What this perk does is that anytime you get a headshot with this weapon, that bullet will be instantly refunded into the magazine. So, it's most useful when you're versing off against enemy bosses, enemies that you can hit shot after shot after shot against in a continuous rate of fire. And the reason being is because with the No Time to Explain, it's technically possible to just, well, go infinite with this weapon. Line up the sights of this weapon against an enemy boss and just hold the trigger. As long as you're getting those precision shots, this weapon will just keep shooting without any need to reload. And therefore, again, it should lend itself to raid gameplay, where boss fights and boss encounters are a very important part of completing the overall raid encounter. So, does it? Is the No Time to Explain any good in the Wrath of the Machine? Well, let's find out. The first encounter in the Wrath of the Machine is, of course, the opening area where you're powering up the spinners, getting the bombs to throw at Vosik to make him retreat inside, so therefore you can follow him. In this first encounter, the No Time to Explain actually performed pretty well. It's able to make use of that Rewind Again perk against the Voltage Eaters especially. You're able to get pretty consistent headshots and shoot at them until they die without reloading most of the time. You gotta remember that Head Seeker is also an intrinsic perk in this weapon, meaning that it's very consistent. Even if you get a few body shots, you miss that burst to the head, you're going to make up for that hopefully with Head Seeker. So against normal adds in this first encounter, it performed very well. Not substantially better than any of the other good primary weapons like the Outbreak Prime or the Steel Medulla, but very well nonetheless. I would say it's up there with those guns. But we're then going to move on to the first real encounter of the raid against Vosik himself. This is where we're really going to get into the nitty-gritty of how the No Time to Explain performs, because we're going to analyze its damage output and compare it with its competitors. So, how was it? Well, I took a few rounds against Vosik to really dial in the damage, making sure I didn't throw any of the Siva bombs, and therefore my damage numbers were purely the No Time to Explain against Vosik, and then just dying after that first damage phase and looking at my damage output. And here are the results. The first time, I was a little sloppy. I had to reload in the middle of the fight, and I quite frankly didn't hit all my headshots. It's actually easier said than done to land consistent headshots, especially against a boss like Vosik, who will move around and dodge about, and will react pretty violently to other damaging factors. If someone shoots him in the face with a sleeper, he's going to recoil a bit from that, and that can skewer your constant headshots. But my overall damage the first time was 137,641,000 damage to Vosik, again only using the No Time to Explain with no other factors involved. No tether, no weapons of light. Now the second time I was a lot better. I was a lot more consistent in landing my headshots, and I basically didn't reload until the exact end of this damage phase. That time the damage numbers did reflect this, elimination of the sloppiness, and I got 149,820 damage. So basically 150,000 damage with the No Time to Explain. Now, that sounds like a pretty big number, and it actually is. This is pretty darn good for a primary weapon. The No Time to Explain will be outperforming the average pulse rifle in this encounter. If you were to upgrade a Hawksaw to highlight and take it in here, the No Time to Explain would be by far the better choice. But How does this weapon compare to the other hardcore raid weapons? Let's first compare it to the Chaos Dogma. This is the Wrath of the Machine raid scout rifle. Now this weapon is pretty highly used in the Wrath of the Machine due to the fact that it has the triple tap and triple double perks. This means that for every 3 headshots on an enemy, you get 2 back. Basically, it's almost as good as the No Time to Explain's Rewind Again. You're just getting constant more bullets for landing those consecutive headshots. Now, the Chaos Dogma against Vosik will do around 150 to a pretty much maximum of 170,000 damage. So if you're landing pretty much all of your headshots with the Chaos Dogma, you are doing around 150 to 170,000 damage to Vosik during the same time frame. So as you can see, that just beats out the No Time to Explain. The No Time to Explain with a good run was doing 150, and yes, with a perfect run, you'd be able to do a little higher than that. But it's still not quite as high as a perfect run of the Chaos Dogma scout rifle. Now let's not overlook the fact that it actually does compete with the Chaos Dogma. The No Time to Explain is coming relatively close to what is considered one of the best primaries of all time in dealing damage to bosses. That should not be overshadowed. But again, the Chaos Dogma does still outperform it, and the worst part is that the Chaos Dogma is legendary, the No Time to Explain is exotic. You're giving up the ability to use a Raise Lighter, a Galahorn, a Sleeper Simulant in the raid for using the No Time to Explain. And actually, to really kind of put this whole thing to rest, compared to one of its primary exotic competitors, the Outbreak Prime, the Outbreak Prime, within the same 1 damage phase under the same conditions, does 250,000 damage or more. Like, it's very easy to get above 250,000 damage for this same encounter. So, with those comparisons, you can clearly see that the No Time to Explain just isn't one of the top tier weapons against raid bosses in the Wrath of the Machine. There are, quite frankly, better options. If you want to use an exotic primary, the Outbreak Prime is just miles ahead of it. However, let's still continue and see how good this gun is in all of the encounters within the Wrath of the Machine, because quite frankly not everyone has the Outbreak Prime. So how is it against the overall Vosik encounter? Again, against the boss, it was fine, not doing as much damage as its hardcore competitors, but still doing a decent amount of damage. Where this gun really excels is against adds. You have a full auto pulse rifle, very easy to use, Headseeker is intrinsic, it just melts adds. But actually, this is kind of a downside. When you're fighting the normal non-shank waves against Vosik, this sounds totally weird, guys, I know, but the No Time to Explain is so good against adds, it's actually kind of bad against adds. And here's what I'm trying to say. Because of Headseeker being intrinsic, a lot of the time you're going to get those headshot kills. Even if you're not like necessarily aiming for headshots, you're aiming for body shots, this gun is so good at recoiling upwards and getting you that headshot Headseeker kill. And therefore, you're going to have those stupid Siva swarms that blast out of enemies' heads that die from headshots invading your screen all the time. You just get so many headshots with the No Time to Explain that it actually kind of creates the downside of having to deal with all of those Siva swarms. It is a factor to be aware of. With that being said, overall it was still quite good against the adds and decent against the boss. I would have to give the No Time to Explain a 6.5 out of 10 for the first real Vosik encounter. Now moving on to the next raid encounter, we have the Siege Engine. How good is the No Time to Explain here? Well, quite frankly, it's just again above average. It's still decent against the adds, but it doesn't really have anything super reliable in this entire encounter to trigger the Rewind Again exotic perk of the No Time to Explain. Like, the reason you're using this gun is for its specific exotic perk. And Yes, you get some rounds back from dealing damage to adds, but it's not very much. Unfortunately, in the very beginning section when you're fighting the siege engine, those shots don't actually count as precision shots. If they did, this gun would actually be a lot better, but you're just fighting adds for the vast majority of this encounter. So in this encounter, this weapon is really just acting as a slightly above average pulse rifle, and if you want that, you might as well use this steel Medulla raid pulse rifle. It's going to get more damage for the Sign of 4 perk, and it doesn't take up an exotic slot. And to be honest, this encounter is pretty hectic and you need to kill the adds right away. You're likely to more often use your secondary and heavy weapons in this encounter than rely on a primary for anything. Now on hard mode you do have to deal with the Splicer tank, but you do not want to be standing out in the open getting consistent primary shots on that thing. It just won't do as much damage. With the tank, you want to deal damage right away, down it as quickly as possible, because the last thing you want is for it to shoot you back. And again, standing in the open, just shooting it as much as possible with a primary is a bad idea. So really the no time to explain in this encounter is just, a 5.5 or a 6 out of 10. It's slightly above average when compared to your normal primary, but really nothing special. Now moving on from the siege engine, we have the first Aksis encounter. And in this encounter, the no time to explain actually felt pretty decent, felt definitely better than it did in the siege engine encounter. And I think the reason being is because in the first Aksis encounter, you actually really want to have an accurate, consistent primary weapon. In the siege engine, you're whipping out a shotgun a lot of the time to deal with all of the adds dropping like right on top of you. It's very hectic, and so a longer range pulse rifle isn't necessarily the best. But in this encounter, although it's just against adds again like it was in the siege engine encounter, again because they're spread out more, because they're at longer range engagements, you more prefer having the no time to explain. I was loving being able to take down the turrets very quickly, my turret and the middle turret and the far left turret very easily. You can just take them down with the no time to explain. You can take down the shanks super easily, you can take down enemies super easily, and because they are a little bit more spread out, you aren't just completely overwhelmed by the stupid Siva cloud when you do get those headshots, as I mentioned earlier. So in this encounter, actually not bad, around a 6.5 or a 7 out of 10, I would say. And moving on, we have the final Aksis encounter. And in this encounter, the no time to explain was actually pretty decent. Now in the final Aksis encounter, the adds you're gonna have to deal with are shanks. Shilly, stupid shanks that shuck. Now in any event, this weapon was pretty decent at taking the shanks out. Probably I would say better than something like the Chaos Dogma. The Chaos Dogma I find shoots really slow and it's not that great against a bunch of shanks coming at you. But this weapon, fully auto pulse rifle, easily took them down. Furthermore, the way the mechanics of this encounter work and the way that Aksis teleports 3 times and then the longest teleportation on the 3rd time lasts the longest, sorry, I said that twice, but it lasts longer than the other 2, most groups tend to save their most damaging items for that final teleportation. He teleports the last time, then you tether, then you put up weapons of light, and then you go to town as a group. So for the first 2 teleportations, often you find yourself shooting him with a primary, staying in your location because you're designated to the right side. Let's say he's on the left side or he's in the middle, and you're empowered. You can't really go up to him and shoot him with your shotgun. You just shoot him with your primary, and therefore having a primary like the no time to explain, which is actually pretty decent against bosses, and you can see me in the gameplay, there's several times where I just line up and just keep shooting him. That's actually pretty decent for the first couple of teleportations. And then for the last one, you take out your shotgun, you take out your heavy, and you go to town. Now, is it better than the Chaos Dogma? Again, probably not in terms of damage dealt. And you're using an exotic next to a legendary. But this weapon, as I said earlier, is better against the ads, I believe. So overall, in this encounter, I would have to say that the No Time to Explain gets a solid 7 out of 10. Nothing fantastic, but actually surprisingly more useful than I thought it would be in this encounter. Now, this whole video really was just for the sake of curiosity and fun. I wanted to see, how good this weapon, a weapon designed for taking down bosses, a weapon arguably designed for raid encounters, would be in the Wrath of the Machine raid. Overall, it was decent. I would say overall, throughout an entire raid ranking, I would give the No Time to Explain a 6, potentially a 6.5 out of 10. Above average, but nothing special. The main problem with this gun is its competitors. You would actually maybe consider running this gun if you wanted to use a good primary against bosses and you didn't like the Chaos Dogma, but the fact of the matter is, this weapon is just so outrageously and frankly hilariously outclassed by the Outbreak Prime. The Outbreak Prime is so much better than this gun, it's frankly ridiculous, like how much better the Outbreak Prime in these encounters actually is. It deals so much more damage because of the Siva Swarms, and it also intrinsically does more damage against Fallen, so it's just so good in this encounter. And so if you're going to give up your exotic slot to a primary, if you have access to the Outbreak Prime, it's just straight up better. It's just straight up better. That's the main problem with the No Time to Explain, is that it just gets completely outclassed. But again, if you don't have access to the Outbreak Prime yet, well, firstly, watch my guide for how to get it, but secondly, this is a reasonable alternative. It's an above average primary weapon that functions decently well in the raid. However, more realistically, if you want a weapon that does that, you're better off with the Chaos Dogma as well. It's the same problem, it's just outclassed by other weapons. That's it for the video, guys. I hope you enjoyed and found this interesting. Now, if you did, please remember to help me out by simply rating and especially sharing this video. If you want to get in touch with me and keep up to date with the latest channel activity, the best way is to follow me on Twitter at RickKakis. That's linked in the description down below, as is my Twitch channel, which you can also follow. Again, I hope you enjoyed the video, and as always, have a good day.